Welcome to the T-Pac Arcade. Today's game is Metroid for the Nintendo Entertainment System. In this 1987 search action game from Nintendo, you guide the cyborg bounty hunter Samus Aran through the planet Zebus in order to stop a bunch of space pirates from weaponizing a dangerous alien lifeform called the Metroid. Now, I understand personal taste is subjective, but I can't imagine anyone hearing cyborg bounty hunter and space pirates in the same sentence without immediately acknowledging that it's basically the coolest thing ever. At a glance, Metroid plays like a standard side-scrolling action platformer. You jump around various sections of the planet, blasting alien creatures with your cannon. But what sets this game apart, at least for its time, is that it's non-linear. The idea is to explore the planet, mapping out the terrain and finding your way to essential items, bosses, and ultimately Mother Brain at the fortress core. I don't know why the chief villain here is some big, inanimate hunk of gray matter suspended in a glass tube when it's supposedly the captain of the space pirates, but I guess they don't subscribe to the whole hooks and eye patches and saying "arg" thing in other galaxies. Anyway, the more upgrades you acquire, the further you can explore into areas that were previously inaccessible. The bombs in Morph Ball let you tunnel through blocks and pipes, missiles blast through fortified doors, the ice beam can freeze enemies into platforms, and these sweet high-top kicks with wings on them allow you to jump up to elevated areas. Not to mention the best power-up, which would have to be the screw attack, or as I like to call it, the jumping somersault of annihilation. It reminds me of when I had a trampoline in high school and would try to do all these crazy flips in midair. The only difference is Samus' screw attack destroys space monsters on contact, whereas my hyperactive trampoline stunts usually just resulted in kneeing myself in the forehead. Now, this sort of roundabout game progression necessitates a lot of level charting and backtracking, which happen to be my two least favorite things in video games. Granted, the idea is to invoke a spirit of discovery for the player as they uncover hidden passages and items, draw maps, and decipher the mystery of how to get through the game. But while I appreciate the concept and admire anyone with the patience and conviction to overcome a challenge like that, the minute I get lost in a video game is the minute I stop having fun. Lucky for me, there are plenty of online guides to steer me through the game without any of that figuring it out myself nonsense. Does that ruin the spirit of Metroid? Maybe, but to me, playing a game like this without a walkthrough would be like building self-assembly furniture without an instruction manual. I know my limits, and a shoe rack doesn't do me any good when I somehow manage to construct it as a piece of modern art that can't even stand up straight and has nails protruding dangerously from every surface. Speaking of which, there's plenty of danger in Metroid. The game does a great job of balancing enemy strength in line with your own as you gain power-ups, and certain monsters even require specific weapons to defeat, like the late-game Metroids themselves, which you have to freeze with the ice beam, then blow up with missiles, or else they attach to you and drain your life force. The same thing happens when you fall in lava too, which is arguably worse, because there are a few instances where you can't jump back out once you've fallen in, and you just have to sit there and watch yourself slowly boil to death like a smoldering hot dog as you pull out a notebook and record the obscenely long and complicated continue password at the game over screen. Taking alarming amounts of damage is also par for the course when you fight the sub-bosses, Kraid the spiky armadillo thing and Ridley the purple alien demon. Even with missiles engaged, they take a lot of hits and so do you. They sure are neat to look at though, which brings me to the aesthetics of Metroid. This game is nothing short of an audio-visual marvel as far as NES games go. The ambient, eerie music tracks, melodic collection chimes and relatively subdued sound effects, stark black backdrops, utilitarian stage layouts, it all adds up to this wonderfully desolate sci-fi atmosphere that just marries perfectly with the gameplay. And not a single sprite or background element feels out of place. From the alien statues holding each power-up to the bug-like enemies that bounce and crawl around every corner. Distinct, but cohesive. And surprisingly menacing and creepy for 8-bit renderings. I love it. I mean, I'm certainly not planning a summer vacation to Planet Zebus, but that 80s sci-fi horror look is just too cool. The most novel aspect of Metroid, at least for its time, was the whole idea of having non-linear progression to begin with, particularly in a platformer. And while I've done plenty of rambling about why that's not for me, it's still a rich concept that's only become more refined and admired in the decades since Metroid made its debut. I can't really comment on the difficulty of Metroid though, at least as the game is intended to be played, given how heavily I relied on strategy guides and save states. Not only did I follow step-by-step documentation on how to beat the game, but I bookmarked every part of the process to save myself from the tedious efforts of trekking back from in-game checkpoints and painstakingly building my health back up after heavy damage. Well, at least for the most part. If I could change one thing in Metroid, I'd find a way to alleviate the need for constant health farming. Even with all my save scumming, I spent at least half my time in this game standing next to monster respawn points, mindlessly hammering the blast button to siphon health from enemies. And the frequency of health drops wasn't even all that consistent. It felt like trying to refuel after a hard workout by eating a bowl of rice one grain at a time, and dropping every other grain when you lift it to your mouth. It was borderline infuriating. But on a more positive note, my favorite part of Metroid is the interactive set pieces that feed into the whole atmosphere of the game, like the Kraid and Ridley statues that trigger the bridge into the final area, and the regenerating organ capsule things that you have to destroy in the Mother Brain bunker. Now, I'm not saying I want to emulate the Metroid aesthetic by filling my apartment with intestines and glass vases, but that sort of thing fits the theme for the game perfectly. Overall, I can definitely see why this is considered such a classic game, and I'm eternally grateful to Peter Hopkins at GravelStudios.com for the excellent Metroid strategy guide. I'll never truly be able to appreciate the game until Mother Brain dons an eye patch and says "arg" like a proper space pirate, but at least there's plenty of intestine vases to occupy me in the meantime.